Now that we've figured out who needs to be confronted, how do we do it? We talked about one already. We examine ourselves first, right? That's the very first thing we do. We check our own sin before we talk to anyone else. And we make sure that we're not doing any of those things, that there's not anything that we've told ourselves is okay, but it's not, nothing that we're hiding from other people, nothing that is habitual, that has become part of our lifestyle, all of those things. We got to examine ourselves. Once we do that, the second thing that we have to do is go to them in love. We're not going to them trying to virtue signal and say, oh, look how good I am and how bad you are. That's not going to be effective. It's not even helpful to you. It also taints the name of God. We're going to them because we care about them and we care about God. And so our attitude and our words have to reflect that. When we go to that person, we need to pray about what we say, how we're going to say it, and that we will present ourselves in a way that we care about them and we care about God, and that they will receive it in that same manner. Galatians 6:1-2 says, brothers, if a man is overtaken by any trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, considering yourself, lest you also be tempted. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. So we do need to bear their burdens, which sin is a burden. We do need to do that, but we have to do it, restore them in gentleness so that we don't bring ourselves into sin, right? So that's the first thing. The next thing is that we don't do it to embarrass them. We don't do it to, like I said, virtue signal, make everybody else see how we're, rebuking them. Nothing like that. Let me read to you what it says in Matthew 18:15-17. This discusses specifically how we confront someone who has sinned. And so this is verse 15 says, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he listens to you, then you've gained your brother. So that's the first step. We're going to do this in the smallest scale possible. So the first thing is we just go to them, just us. We don't talk about them behind their backs. We don't say it in front of everybody. We don't, announce it to the world. We go to them quietly, just them, and we try to, relay to them that we're concerned about them. We're concerned about others. We're concerned about God's name. Okay. So we do that. If that works, great. We never have to mess with anything else. We never have to bring it before anyone else. But if it doesn't work, then it says in verse 16, but if he doesn't listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses. So, if he doesn't listen to you, then you find someone else that also loves this person and also loves God, and you go to them and you say, hey, here's what's going on. I'm worried about this person, or I'm worried about how they are representing God's name, and I'd like for you to come with me and talk with them about it. And so you bring 1 or 2 people with you and y'all go and talk about it. Then it says the third step, verse 17. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen to even the church, let him be to you as a Gentile or a tax collector. Okay, so this is another instance that you would definitely want to go and talk to someone. If they're in a leadership position in your church, that's very important, because you don't want them teaching other people if they somehow think that what they're doing is right, or if they are leading this group of people and they're doing something obviously wrong. We don't want that. That is not going to represent your church well. And so if they're in a leadership position in your church, you definitely have to speak to them. And you would want to bring it before your church and say, hey, this person is doing this outside of the church, and other people are going to know it if I know it. This is not okay. We need to address this because they're representing God's name. Now, even if they're not in a leadership position, this would be the course of action that we would follow if they're involved in our church and we're trying to restore them to God. And then it says, if they won't even listen to the church, then treat them as a Gentile or a tax collector. And so what they're saying is, if they're not even listening to what you say is in the church, if all of you are in agreement that this is what God believes is right or wrong, and they're going against God, then treat them as if they're an unbeliever, because they're not following God. And it's blatant, and they choose not to. And they're just saying, I'm going to live like the world. I don't choose to follow God anymore. So treat them like the people that don't follow the Lord. Treat them like the rest of the world. And so these are the ways that we can be zealous for our God, that we can go to others and talk to them if we find that they are doing something against God that's tainting his name, tainting the church, other believers, the body of Christ, all of those things. It's important that we defend God, that we fight for him, but we have to do it in the right way with the right people at the right time. And so those are just a couple of tips that I had as I was reading through this passage, and I realized, oh, all of these people are just having a deep passion for God. And how can we do that too?